Don't miss the biggest show of the summer, Kings of the West, starring Bone Thugs and Harmony, E40, Too Short, Mac 10, The Dog Pound, DJ Quick, Sugar Free, and Khadijah, live July 11th at Wells Fargo Arena. Don't miss Kings of the West with Bone Thugs and Harmony, E40, Too Short, DJ Quick, Mac 10, The Dog Pound, Sugar Free, and Khadijah. Get tickets now at HighVTix.com.
Iowa Fireworks Farm is Iowa's largest fireworks store. 6,000 square feet of hand-picked fireworks, over 50 brands, and 1,300 different products to choose from. But they're also family-owned and operated. Iowa Fireworks Farm is the one stop you need to make before July 4th. You'll find them just south of the Metro. Take I-35 to exit 43 at New Virginia. Head east and look for the Big Red Barn. At Iowa Fireworks Farm, the toughest part will be deciding what not to buy.
We recommend listening to the CW Pod with a glass of Steeple Ridge Bourbon. Grown, distilled, well-rested, and bottled in Erling, Iowa. Now from the Channel Seed Studios, this is the CW Pod, fueled by Steeple Ridge.
One of the most interesting people I know joins me today on the CW Pod. We are presented, as always, by our friends at Steeple Ridge Bourbon, the Lonely Oak Distillery. Shout out to my friend Pat Hoffman. Look for the bottle with the penny on the top. What a trademark. It's a genius move that he made. Steeple Ridge Bourbon, you can drink it straight. You can drink it with ice. You can mix it if you want. I wouldn't recommend that. It is good. You don't realize how good it is until you're gone and you're in Florida for a week, and then you have to drink all the stuff on the shelf down there. Missed my Steeple Ridge, baby. Paul Shirley, most of you know him as a former Cyclone, a former NBA player. He wrote a really, really great book about 15 years ago about playing professional basketball overseas. It's one of my favorite sports books ever. And he's now, he does some business coaching. He's just a really fascinating guy, and he has a brand new book out. It's called The Art of Focused Work. Paul's going to be joining me in Iowa coming up in July. We're going to do a couple of events together. We'll give you some information on that coming up. But this was the perfect book at the perfect time for me. I'm almost done with it. And do you ever feel like you work a full day, but you don't feel like you got anything done at all? Where you're just constantly being enamored by just crap nonstop, and you just don't feel like you ever get anything accomplished. That's how I feel every day. And Paul's book really, The Art of Focused Work, it teaches you how to actually get things done. I thought it was just very enlightening. I would highly encourage any of you to go out and buy it. It's a really easy read. It's only like 150 some pages. I knocked it out in like 2 days. Well, I'm almost done with it. I'll have it done in like 2 days. But Paul is a friend. I've known him for, 10, 15 years, interviewed him a bunch, starting to get to know him better now through this book and the events that we have coming up. But really just a fascinating human being. He thinks about the world differently. He's just brilliant. And I hope you guys enjoy this. I hope you can take something from it. I hope you buy a book, and I hope you come out and join us at some of our events coming up in July. So here it is in the Channel Seed Studios, my friend, former Cyclone and a brilliant writer, Paul Shirley. All right, guys. Well, this is a fun one today for a lot of different reasons. A guy who I'm getting to know better now. I've interviewed him, 2-3 times over the course of my career. Really good writer is how I know him more so, and then a basketball player. I remember watching you play basketball, Paul Shirley, but I read your book. Can I keep my jersey? Is that what
That's the first one.
Yeah, the European basketball one. I've read all of your books. I think you're a brilliant writer. You happen to be an Iowa State guy, which is something I'm passionate about, and we're going to do a little work together coming up here in the next month or so. So I'm looking forward to getting you to Iowa and doing some events. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm good. It's been it's been a year of a lot of Iowa connections. We were back for the 25th anniversary of the really good teams I was on 2000, 2001 in January. And it was, I think, interesting to me how enough time has passed for me and for some of my teammates where it no longer feels like we're trying to hold on to the glory years by being back. Yeah. It's like we're old enough now where people realize we're doing other things with our lives, which is really refreshing because it just takes a while to get to that, which isn't to say that we don't want to talk about some of those old stories and the old days, but we are enough kind of mixed into the history of things where it's not quite as vivid, which is actually a good thing, I would say.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that. We'll start there. And we'll get into your new book, The Art of Focused Work. So Paul is actually coming to Ames. We're going to do a couple of events for fans coming up in the month of July. One of them is going to be a subscription thing for Cyclone Fanatic members. But on Thursday night, the 17th, again, Thursday night, July 17th, you can come out and hang out with Paul and myself. We will be at Sweet Caroline's in Ames, so in downtown Ames, we're going to get on stage, and Paul's going to talk about his new book, which I think is like a super important message right now. We're going to talk about that today on the show too, but you can come out and you can buy a book. Paul will sign it for you, do all that good stuff. But that'll be Sweet Carolina in Ames.
And we'll show a little video, I hope. Like there's some, the book opens with me playing for Iowa State, and there's some really great video of that. And
because it brought me back reading. You keep going back to these free throws at Allen Fieldhouse in Kansas, and the last time I interviewed you, you probably don't even remember this. It was, man, I was on the radio back then, and it was about the time that Stacey got run out of Colorado State.
Mm-hmm.
Since then, I had the weirdest thing happen, Paul. I thought I was being catfished by somebody. I kept getting emails from Larry Stacey, who I had never talked to in my life. Well, Larry had been listening to my show, and I hadn't even been critical. It's not how I would put it. I would say I was very much of the, hey, sometimes you make an action and you have to suffer for the consequences. Like, just because you're a great basketball coach doesn't mean you're immune from things that you have coming to you. And I didn't ever pretend to know everything about Larry State, but I had you on, and you didn't want anything to do with the guy, and you were very blunt about it. You were very real about it. I also had I used to do a show with Jake Sullivan. And Jake really loved Larry, so I'd like talk to you, and then I had his side of you, and like I was kind of like, man, sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. But I thought it was really interesting how I read some quotes from you when you came back that it seemed like you guys squashed it. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's true. This feels like a WWE lead-in where I'm like, where if I was like, yeah, we quashed our differences, but now I'm back in the ring ready to fight that son of a bitch.
Yeah. Jim
we had some really great talks in Ames, and have since had several really long phone calls that have been
that's awesome,
generative, and I think healing for both of us. I think one of the things that we have figured out is that we are way more alike than different, and with age, I think you start to understand that, and I think there was, I don't want to tell tales, but I think he would say this too, that he's had to think a lot about the way he behaved when he was at Iowa State, which was suboptimal. I thought, especially to me, coming from, some people may know the history that I went to Iowa State with Tim Floyd, had him for 2 years. He left. I was really close with Coach Floyd and still am. And so there was this shift there where I was trying to figure out this new person, and his way of dealing with me was not at all like Tim Floyd's way of dealing with me. And so that was a struggle. I think it was also, if you think in historical context, we're now at this point where the players have all the power. in college sports, which is arguably a problem. Like there is no balance left. But back then it was all the other way, where the players had no power at all. The coaches really could treat us however they wanted. And at some point that will be lost to history, probably, that they were making millions of dollars every year, and I was walking around trying to scrounge up $6 to go to Bebop's on Sunday night because the dorms were closed for food, right? So there was this interesting power dynamic where they could kind of treat us however they wanted. If they were in a benevolent dictator mode, like some people, then that would work out okay. If they were in more of a put their thumb on you dictator mode, it didn't go all that well for the player. And I think, like, generally speaking, it works out better to be kinder to people. But you could kind of get away with being real rough on 18, 19, 20-year-old kids because we didn't have any way to get out of it, right? We would have to sit out if we left. There was no easy way to leave. In fact, in some cases, the university would have to give you permission. We were all kind of technically on 1-year scholarships. Like, people didn't know that back then. Like, it was usually sort of understood that you would just get to stick around, but the coach could sort of just say like you're not going to play, you should go somewhere else, which is a tough spot to be. And obviously now we're at the exact opposite end of that spectrum. Yeah.
So Eustace reached out to me and I had him on and I talked to him a couple times. I saw him down at the tournament in Orlando and it was really enlightening. I mean, it was like a guy who really wanted to get his story, and it was a very popular, one of the most popular podcasts I've ever done. He was insanely forthright, really apologetic about some things. It was been a really interesting thing, and then I was happy to see that because you were one of the first people I thought of, just because I had talked to you about it publicly before. Yeah. And when I read some of your quotes from coming back, it made me feel good for all of you guys if you were able to bury some of that at least.
Yeah, for sure. And he was very generous with his emotions and his time, and I think it actually kind of speaks to that same point around time passing. Getting some context for all of us that hey, look, we were on a really good team, but it wasn't the only good team. There's other good teams. When we left Iowa State, it was kind of raggedy there for a while, right? Like, it was the Wayne Morgan years, and there was just this tumult at all times around who was even going to be the head coach, or is Iowa State going to try to be a good basketball program or just like a medium one? So I think there was also, in our first 10 years out of college, there was probably also a lot of ache for those glory days of Tim Floyd, Larry Eustace, where even though both of those coaches weren't there all that long, there was a clear kind of impression they put on the program. Whereas after that, it started to get a little bit muddled. Then you lose Fred Hoiberg to the Bulls, and it felt to me from a distance like Iowa State fans can't really win here, at least in basketball. Not in a literal way, but in terms of some kind of continuity or tradition. And it feels to me, from the outside, like there's a little bit more solidity to things at this point, which is cool.
Do you still watch Iowa State?
I don't watch any basketball ever. I would rather you put a gun to my head. I did see when we were back, they played Baylor, so I watched that game, obviously. But that'll be the only basketball game I watch for quite a while.
Why do you not watch basketball?
It's just if you had to watch people, imagine 30 years from now, you had to watch people do podcasts, not the product of the podcast, but the mechanics of making the podcast. You'd be like, I'm not going to watch that. So that's how basketball is to me, where I burned out that circuit in my brain, and it is, it's not truly painful. It's just, I'm completely ambivalent about it. And it kind of it's kind of annoying in general because I know what's supposed to happen. And because I just saw it for so many of my years, that it's really boring. I just know that should have happened, but it didn't. And so this team is screwed because they can't do that thing. And it just isn't the reason I was good at basketball wasn't because I'm 6'9". It's not because I could shoot that great or do anything physically that great. It was because I understood the game so well. And so understanding it means dissecting it to like a pretty absurd degree, like almost on a molecular level. And so then once you're away from that, it's impossible to just enjoy it. Like I watch baseball and enjoy it because I don't understand baseball that well. I can see it and just be like, oh, I know enough to tell you that Bobby Witt is really good. But otherwise, I don't know. I can speculate, but I don't have that same granular understanding. So therefore, I can watch it baseball with some level of enjoyment.
Well, that's a big part of your book, really, as far as how you were good at basketball. I thought, let's get into it. I have it right here, The Art of Focused Work. It's out now. People can buy it online. Right. Let's sell some books here before we
go to Amazon and buy that thing. People will be like, well, what's the way that like you do the best? It doesn't matter. Just buy it on Amazon. Like there's no better way to buy it. Just buy it. And read it.
Real talk. I'm about 3/4 the way through it. So this isn't one of those interviews where the person acts like they've read the book.
Which I appreciate. Yeah.
I even sent you a picture of it. I was at the beach last week when I,
where were you? Reading. Where were you on the beach? What beach? What were we talking
Hollywood Beach in Florida.
Nice.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, it was cool. Neat spot. I like the boardwalk areas.
I've never been.
Well, I had like a really enlightening week. I'm a country guy from Southwest Iowa, total redneck. And then you go to a beach town and you've got like 80-year-old hippies. You've got the guy like me who obviously came. He's got tan lines. Then you've got the blue-haired people over there. You got skateboarder. It's awesome. I love like all the different. And then we can't even make this up. My 10-year-old daughter loves Avril Lavigne.
Oh wow, throwback for her.
Yeah, we took her to an Avril Lavigne show in Hollywood, Florida, and it was incredible. It was incredible, dude. Like
people are just professionals, and when you see them, you're like, "Oh, there's a reason you're famous. You are a professional."
It was just one of the most cool nights of my life.
Is Avril Lavigne still putting out new stuff?
She funny you ask. She's putting out she has a greatest hits like tour thing that she's doing now, and she has new music coming out.
Yeah, a friend and I saw. Up here so I'm in Denver, and we drove up to Loveland 3 years ago, I think it was, for Limp Bizkit. It was tremendous. Like you're like, oh, this is why they were famous. Like they're so good at putting on a show.
Oh yeah,
and also like don't take themselves that seriously. They were just like, we're gonna do flashback to 1999. We'll just play all the songs you want to hear, right? Like they're not taking themselves seriously. And you're like, oh, he was kind of messing with everybody this whole time, but they just didn't. It was too hard for people to understand that. So yeah, that's similar where you're like, the pros keep doing it and they know what they're doing.
Just play the hits, cool. Man. Yeah. Play the hits for people. Yeah,
exactly.
So, anyways, I'm reading this book on the beach, and I say to my wife's a veterinarian, but she manages like a staff of like 25 doctors, vet techs, receptionists, whatever. And I was like, you should have them all read this. And I was serious because a lot of this book, the way I took it is about process. And which is interesting for me. This came at a good time for me because I am finishing my first book right now. And I'm really close. And this is actually happening. A lot of people are like, because I did this for 3 years, like, yeah, I'm writing a book. But you actually have to sit down and do it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what word processor you're using. You have to sit down and do it. And that's how I'm getting it done, is I finally found like a process that works for me. But you said, to quote you, you're not good at you weren't good at basketball because you were 6'9". You were good at basketball because how you broke the game down. And I thought the parts where you compared your process of becoming a good basketball player to just what you do on a daily life when it comes to sitting down at your computer and writing a book, for instance, was really interesting. How can people put that into their daily lives?
I think having this lens of sports helps because it detaches us somewhat from the pressure of having to sit down and do this stuff, right? So sports works as a good metaphor in that we can understand this central analogy that I use of me at the free throw line at Allen Fieldhouse. There's chaos abounding, right? Everything about my senses is being dominated by chaos, and I still have to go through some system in order to concentrate and get this done. This is what people are going through now, even when they need to sit down and write one good email, right? Weirdly, like the same device that we're trying to send the email on is often trying to distract us as best it can, whether that's our computer or our phone. But our entire environments often are trying to distract us because we just have so much information coming at us. I came across this stat I love after finishing the book, which is inconvenient, but that's how this goes, that now we will take in something like 74 gigabytes of information every day. If it were 500 years ago, we would take in that amount of information in our entire lifetime. So go from, this historical mark of 500 years ago, 74 gigabytes your entire life, to now that in one day. Now, obviously, we can quibble with the exactitude of those stats because, how do you actually measure that stuff? But I think it matches up with what we're all feeling, where it's not just that there's a lot of information coming at us, it's also changing really quickly. We don't know from day to day, or let's not say day to day, from quarter to quarter, year to year, which communication device am I actually going to use? All these offices, by Monday.com and Asana and Slack and all this stuff. And we just keep inundating people, not only with the information, but the job of figuring out how to even get the right information, right? We're sifting through this all the time, which is a problem for our brains because we are not a particularly strong creature. We can't climb a wall like a spider. We don't have a horn like a rhinoceros. So we rely on our brains. And historically, our brains wanted more information because more information was good. It told us, is there a fire over there? Is there a tiger over there? So information was scarce. More of it was almost always good. But then at a certain point, we have just tipped that scale and we've kind of given ourselves informational diabetes. So in the same way that it used to be sugar, good, meant fruit is ripe. I eat the fruit, I get nutrition. That fruit is also rare, so I don't have to worry about eating too much sugar. Then we start refining sugar, and lo and behold, diabetes comes on the scene, right? So does heart disease, so does obesity, etc. It's kind of the same with information. Historically, it was scarce, so we would always say the more information we can get, the better. Now we have so much of it that we can't really manage it. And so the idea, the central thought is, how do we figure out ways to first address that this is difficult without guilt and shame, and then build systems so that we can focus and do this stuff that's important to us, whether that stuff is, like you said, making a free throw, writing a book, writing a business proposal. It could be sending that good email to a boss. It could be even as simple as, I want to sit down with my wife and have a really present conversation over dinner, right? It's not just work stuff, although I talk more about that. It's also, how do we do this in our day to day? How do I carve out time to read a book that I really want to read, listen to an album, whatever it is, get rid of some of this temptation that's coming at me at all times.
You mentioned all the information that it's gotten even harder because we don't even know what's real.
That's true. Yeah.
Because of these AI memes and just fake news in general.
Yeah.
So now not only are we getting all of this that we're receiving, but now we have to figure out, is that even a real thing?
Yeah. And I think one thing that helps me a lot is to think back to kind of anthropologically, how would we have managed this in a village of 150 people, right?
This was my favorite part of the book.
The anthropology of it?
Well, I don't want to interrupt you here. You go ahead.
No, tell me.
I read this to my wife. When just thinking about how 100 years ago, you may have just known the people in your village and your family. Mm-hmm. You don't even know. If I'm a member of the Cherokee tribe in 1850, I don't even know that France exists.
Right. Yeah. Right. And
this is just me and my people, and we gotta kill a buffalo and eat and make, let's have some shelter, and then hopefully we have enough time and we'll start a fire and just hang out. Right.
Right.
And now we're so inundated with. I know everything that's going on in Iran right now, right?
Yeah.
I know exactly what they're doing. I can flip on Twitter and see what's going on there. That, putting it down in simple terms like that was just fascinating to me.
Well, and I think a lot about, do you remember the movie Bowling for Columbine, the Michael Moore movie from
I did watch that that was
so there's a
early
there's a
2000s, right? Mid 2000s.
There's a really great, so that movie's conceptually about like school shootings, but there's this really great interview with Marilyn Manson in there where he talks about like the media's job. Michael Moore's asking him, like, why do they use you as kind of the shibboleth for like scaring people? And he's like, the media's job is to scare you, make you buy stuff. Scare you, make you buy stuff. And so it's kind of similar now where companies have leveraged our need for information, not wrongly, that's their business, in order to keep us kind of scared and in this state of agitation at all times, which then makes us behave in ways that could be counted as a maladaptive coping mechanism. So we buy things, we look at girls in bikinis on Instagram, whatever the thing is, we bet on sports, whatever it might be, in order to kind of salve that chaos that's going on in our heads, which we're just not built for, right? So, I work with people one-on-one a bunch, and one of the hardest things that I have to do is get them to think really hard about, why is your phone on at night? Right. So I'm always trying to get people, like, just put your phone on airplane mode when you go to bed. When you wake up and get through like the morning stuff, you can turn it back on. The world hasn't changed, but they will tell me, like, what if somebody needs me? Like, what? The reality is 40 years ago, you would have figured it out, right? Like and 40 years ago to the rest of time, we figured it out. It's only been in this last period of time where we've convinced ourselves that we're like the center of the world in a very narcissistic way, where the world wouldn't be able to exist if we weren't online at all times. And so that's fine if you want to live in chaos. But if you would like to get stuff done, and more importantly, I would say, find meaning and purpose in your life through getting stuff done with other people, whether that's creating stuff, running the business, connecting to your family, we have to figure out some ways to combat this and return our brains basically to that reset, like you said, of it's 1850 and I could really give a shit what's happening in Iran. Not because I don't care about other people in the world, but because I can only care about so many people. There's this interesting number, Dunbar's number, which is 150 people. This anthropologist, whose last name is Dunbar, theorized that we can really only manage about 150 social connections, which goes back to his research into how tribes would usually split off after about 150 people. And once again, the exact numbers don't really matter that much, but it fits kind of with our understanding of how many people we can actually manage in our social circle. And like you said, one of the things the internet does is try to kind of flatten things and convince you that everybody in the world is your friend. And then that makes it really hard because you're having to parse out, do I trust that person? If we were in that village that you mentioned, I could be like, well, Steve down at the shack by the creek that's selling the fish, that son of a bitch is always selling spoiled fish. So I can't really trust Steve very much, right, to feed me fish. But now, because there's 150 billion of us, not really, it's 8 billion, whatever it is, we're trying to suss out all the time. Do we trust Steve? Are the fish that he's metaphorically selling us like worth us eating or not? And that's exhausting, right? I think that's, what I get from a lot of people is this sense of exhaustion at all times that doesn't, in a lot of ways, doesn't make sense because they're not running 8 miles a day, but it's this job of like, not only getting the information, but like you said, trying to figure out, like, is it even trustworthy, which is not actually a debate about like fake news and all this. It's just that there's just so many sources in general, and it's on a varied degree of trustworthiness. So
if you would talk to, I'll personalize this for me. If you would talk to like a old school newspaper writer, those guys would write like one story a day. They would submit their story and then they would just kind of be done and then they'd work on the next one or whatever. When I started, I only did websites. I was one of the first guys to do like a fan site in this state, but it like social media didn't exist. So I would cover the game. I would publish the story. I would put it on our message board. And then it was kind of like, well, everything's just done until tomorrow. Well, now, like our world, the audience expects us to be on call 24 hours a day, 365 days out of the year. Like I remember one year, it was right after Matt Campbell got the job at Iowa State. They had like 3 commitments on Christmas Day. And I covered it, right? Like, what else are you going to do? Like, this is what I have to do. It's what these people pay for, right? It's exhausting professionally, but it also is, if you're I would think as the sports fan, it's like, when is enough, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
and I think that's
like,
where,
take your world, like the NBA. It's not about the games anymore. It's the Instagram league, right? Like,
totally. Yeah. And I think I think what we're feeling is this sense that because people are not really okay, they're seeking out this kind of constant dopamine hit, right? Like there's these books, Dopamine Nation, and it's not like yours or my idea that people are trying to find some sense of release through, maybe it's the sports team, maybe it's the girl on Instagram that we mentioned, because they feel so little control over their lives, and they have, in a lot of cases, not a ton of meaning in their day-to-day. So one thing I always want to come back to this, like, I'm not that interested in just like optimizing for the sake of optimizing. I want people to find meaning and fulfillment and purpose in what they do. And often that is because of like who you work with and the sorts of things that you're choosing to do. I have a brother who lives in Wisconsin who works at a plant nursery, takes care of some sheep and some cows. And he has found a lot of meaning in the day-to-day of like cultivating these plants and then selling the plants to some people and taking care of those cows. So that, to me, has as much validity or even more than a lot of the kind of knowledge work jobs that we talk about now. In fact, this book originally was going to be called The Art of Knowledge Work, but I was like, you know what? I think a lot of this knowledge work stuff is going to go out of fashion because it sucks. Like people just hate doing it. And that's not necessarily your exact world. It's more the kind of middle management of people just moving information around and they don't really know why. I meet a lot of people here in Denver who work in tech sales or in IT, and they feel so untethered because there's not really a beginning and an end to what they do. Sorry, I'm doing it looks like that's not a great motion, Paul. Don't do that anymore. But so I think people just desire kind of desperately a sense of, I metaphorically plowed the field today, and then I went home and I went to sleep, and that was enough. There's this sort of annoyingly literary reference that I like where Tolstoy, after writing War and Peace and Anna Karenina, got everything he wanted. So this is like mid to late 1800s. He is now the most famous author in Russia. And he's like, why do I want to kill myself? And so he went on this pursuit of figuring out like, what is meaning? And his realization or his conclusion was that the wood chopper has the most meaning in the world. The guy who goes out and chops the wood, comes home, has food waiting for him, falls asleep exhausted, gets up and does it the next day, which is kind of Sisyphean or something. But that we all desire kind of those beginnings and ends to our days and to the stuff we work on. And these huge projects that we've given people remove some of that, where if I tell you like, hey, you got to have this 30-page PowerPoint done in 3 weeks. And you're like, well, how do I work on that day to day? What I would argue is it's coming up with like, you're going to spend 20 minutes on it day after day after day. And that's it. You only have to do those 20 minutes. And then when it's done, you can evaluate, was my process satisfactory? Much like you writing the book, you're going to put the book out. And then you can think, okay, was the process that I used satisfactory? Do I need to modify my process slightly such that then the end result is where I want it to be? But if you judge it entirely on end result, you kind of want to kill yourself because like it's so binary that we don't have that many options. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. The process has been the hardest part for me by far. Like sitting down and writing it, like, but it's like it shouldn't be this way, but because it's something I'm passionate about, what I'm writing about. But actually sitting down and writing it has been the hardest part, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. And that's where I say so much now that we have to remove the word should because it evokes guilt, right? We will tell ourselves like, this shouldn't be hard, but the reality is it is hard. So we just have to accept like it's hard to sit down and turn your brain from whatever you were doing to this thing you're trying to focus on. In your case, it's writing a book. In the same way that like when I was a kid and I was trying to get better at basketball in the summertime, my parents would give my brothers and I like tasks for the day, right? Like we had to go, we grew up kind of on a farm. So we had to go, feed the chickens and water the cows. And we probably needed to weed the garden. We would have like read for 20 minutes, make 50 free throws. Maybe I was playing baseball at the time too. So it was like throw 50 pitches into the like fence or whatever. Well, why was it hard to get myself to go do those free throws? I liked shooting free throws. I liked working on basketball. It's because you have to change from one thing to the next, and because we're all lazy pieces of shit deep down, right? Like we're all built to conserve energy at all times because it behooved us to do that. And that's true of our mental energy also. So just admitting that and then recognizing that there are ways to kind of hack that. So I talk to people all the time about building cues and rewards so that they can change their behavior. So like if you want to sit down and write a book and you're like, how can I make this a treat for myself? Okay. So for me, forever, it has been, I go to a coffee shop to start my day to do this like focused work that I want to do. I love coffee. I don't allow myself to have coffee in my house so that I can treat myself to the coffee shop for like, that's my signal of like, okay, now you get coffee, but you also have to kind of get to work. Right. And then similarly, when I'm done with something, I will usually listen to like a trashy metal song or a trashy rap song, which is enough reward for me at this point. But reminding people like if those cues and rewards aren't sufficient, that you can crank them up. If you need to like get a blow pop after you write for the day or work on that presentation that we're talking about every time, then as long as the sort of cost of the blow pop is outweighed by the win of doing the thing, like who cares? Just understanding ourselves enough to know that like there are days where like you and I don't want to send that email. And we're like, this is crazy. This is not a hard email. I got to send this guy an email. But for whatever reason, it is hard. So I might have to go like here at the building I'm in, the process, we have this cooler full of spindrifts in the back, right? So I'll go get a spindrift and be like, okay, Paul, you get a spindrift. You then sit down and send this email. And on some level, yeah, it sucks that I'm 47 years old. I've accomplished a whole bunch of stuff in my life, and I still need that spindrift in order to write that email. But that's also just accepting that this is who I am, right? And that we are all this way.
There's something very simple about this. So again, I mentioned my wife's a veterinarian. We have a 1-year-old golden retriever. We've trained dogs. Our first dog was a certified therapy dog. A lot of what you're saying comes down to how I'm training a 1-year-old dog right now.
Totally.
And I'm going to give you a treat.
And don't you think that one of our problems as a species is that we are torn between animal and higher being, right? We are an animal, but we also like to think of ourselves as a higher being. And I think one of the things that's happened in the last, 60 years is we're so in our heads at all times. We've kind of lost sight of the animalistic side. And so, yeah, maybe it does suck that we're basically like not that far removed from dogs or fruit flies, but we can also use that to our advantage and be like, well, I can exist in that kind of animal nature in order to accomplish the things that give me the impression that I'm a higher being.
So this isn't going anywhere. And we're building a new website right now. Like I'm going through all the new tech that's out there, constantly trying to build these media companies.
I thought you were like, this interview is not going anywhere, Paul. Like, get fucked.
I'm thinking with like AI and just all this. Are we screwed? Like, are we screwed as humans? Because can we handle all this crap? I don't know if we can.
I think we are in a unique spot where the commercialization and the chaos of it has really outstripped the culture that usually keeps these things within bounds. So what will happen is that culturally we will build in a bunch of guardrails or guides for how to manage all of this in the same way that we probably did around the advent of many different technologies and temptations throughout history, right? So I mean, look at like the 10 Commandments that came down because somebody needed to be like, you can't be having sex with your neighbor's wife. Like, that's just not going to work out. The society won't function if people do that. And so similarly, I think we will get to a point where if you get your phone out at dinner, I'll be like, dude, what the hell are you doing? Put that away.
Like, rude.
We don't do that. Like, it's just, I mean, somebody that I was talking to recently compared it to smoking, right? So it's at a certain point, you just didn't smoke in restaurants, right? Because it was gross, which is debatable because it was kind of an awesome time when people are just smoking cigs at restaurants. But the main thing was that it became culturally unacceptable to do that. And then we start building in these guardrails.
Are we doing that now? Because I feel like with my kids, we're starting to be very concerned about how much screen time they are getting.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if 10 years ago if parents were like that because we didn't have the research.
Yeah. And you didn't have the anecdotal experience of being around kids who had been on screens too much. And you're like, oh, they're in trouble, right? So this is interesting to me that my dad got a PhD in child psychology, and his research was on the effects of children's television on children in the 1970s. So it was kind of early in the days of PBS where they were trying to figure out, like, how can we use TV for powers of good? So that was the world of Fred Rogers and Sesame Street and 3-2-1 Contact and all of that. And I think it's similar, or at least it echoes that time period where there was starting to be this understanding like, oh, we can't just have these kids just sit in front of the TV all day long and watch Gunsmoke, right? So can we create some content that's pro-social for children? Is that what we want to do? Is that a good idea? It became pretty obvious at a certain point, like, it's not great to just sit in front of the TV. So maybe I would argue better parents were like, look, get outside. You can't just be sitting in front of the TV. And I think that's similar to what we're going through in that all these technologies will race out at first, and then we realize, like, oh, that's not great. I mean, remember that, like, Bayer made heroin as a drug for people to just consume in, like, I don't remember the exact year, like the late 19th century or early 20th century. It was just a drug to, like, get through the day. And then we're like, whoa, that's not a good idea, right? So usually the tech or the commercialization goes first, and then we rein it back in. I think the problem right now is just that it has been so accelerative, and we have somehow figured out how to make technology or the new tech always seem cool, when in fact it's kind of not cool at all to just, like, stand in line and buy another iPhone for $1,000. That's, like, the opposite of cool. Cool is to be aloof and be like, hey, prove to me that I should buy this, as opposed to getting us to race out and, like, just adopt Slack. Like, Slack sucks. Nobody likes to be on Slack, but somehow we've created this, like, weird arms race mentality where offices will be like, well, if you're not on Slack, you're going to be missing out. No, you won't. You'll figure it out. You'll be fine.
Mm-hmm. The last thing I kind of have for you before we kind of wrap this up and just, again, tell people to go buy Paul's book. I'm like 3/4 the way through it, and it came at a really good time for me. I actually have this, I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called, they didn't pay me to say this, Roots. It's an app. You should look into it, but it's kind of nasty. Like, you set it and be like, okay, I need this much screen time a day. I could be on this app and then it'll be nasty to you. It'll shut it down. And It's not one of those ones where you can, like, decode it and get back. So, like, again, I feel like we're getting there.
Yeah. I think that you're right. I don't want to interrupt, but I will say that, like, that is the first tendrils of, like, we're starting to understand that this isn't great. And then I think it's going to grow from there, where it will more just be like, you will say, in the same way that it would have been insane in the 1980s to just carry a television around with you. You'd be like, well, that person has a problem. We will get to a point where we're like, maybe just leave your phone at home and, like, go to this concert and enjoy it, right?
Well, I hate what it's done to us mentally. And I don't know, like, I think about when I was a kid and I would just go on these bike rides with my friends, and we would be gone for 4 hours, never checked in with our parents. They never thought anything was wrong.
Right.
The anxiety it's given us, like, my 10-year-old daughter, and she doesn't have a phone but she does. I got her an Apple Watch so I could track her. Basically, it's GPS thing. Kind of sick, but, But, like, she'll text a friend or something, or she doesn't text, whatever she's doing to communicate. And if the friend doesn't get back to her within, like, an hour, she's, like, anxious. Like, oh, are they mad at me? And I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, what are, and I feel like everybody who is listening to this has experienced that in some form where it is created. Like if you call somebody, I remember 10 years ago, if you called somebody and they hadn't called you back, or if you were on the phone with somebody and they ran out of signal and it dropped, oh my God, they got in a car wreck and died.
Yeah, totally.
You see where I'm going with this? This
catastrophization of everything.
Yeah, it makes us worry about shit that doesn't even exist like 99.9% of the time.
Yeah, and that's what I often have to come back to is if we had added all of this stuff in and we were doing great, then I would just shut up. But it seems that all I get from people is this kind of brittleness and this anxiety and this kind of jitteriness around feeling like they're missing out, they're disconnected, they're like you said, anxious, worried all the time. I don't know the exact stat, but like 40% of Americans have been on an antidepressant in the last year. 70% of us are overweight or obese. We have 2 million cancer diagnoses for the first time in 1 year as of 2024. So like things aren't going well. And so I would point to a lot of, and what I want to say about that though is things are not going well in terms of like human flourishing. In general, we have enough food. Like there's a lot of things that are positive, but what I see in terms of just like people's satisfaction with life leaves a lot to be desired. And that does come largely in with parenting, right? Like the book, The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt, I can never remember how to say it, is really great in this, in that talks about this thought that it's not just that you and I are being nostalgic, that it's actually better for children to be put up against some obstacles, to have to figure their way out of things, to understand the rules of how to like play and how to lead and how to get themselves out of trouble, which is just as important as getting yourself into trouble. But as we are removing a lot of that, then it's creating generations where they have less resilience and ability to like innovate and do cool shit. What I'm always pushing for is like, I want you to do cool shit and also feel good about doing it, which comes back to getting rid of some of this unnecessary stuff, getting rid of some of that fear, right? Like one of the things you're talking about is that fear-based response of course you love your child. Of course you don't want to be ostracized by the other parents. If you're the one weirdo who's just like, go do whatever, right? Mm-hmm. So it's this, we have to combat that fear-based mentality, the kind of social pressure that we're all under to like do things a certain way. I see that even in my own life where I will feel weird about, like, I recently just got rid of my TV. And sometimes it's strange to not know what people are watching on television. And I will feel bad for a second. And then I'm like, but think about all my heroes, right? All of the people that I loved, like reading when I grew up. Do I think they worried about what other people thought? Probably not, right? So why can't I be a little bit like that? And I'm starting to get a little more strident about some of this stuff of around like the number of distractions people are feeling, the lack of satisfaction that they feel in their lives. How can we just say like, look, this isn't going well. We're old enough to know better. Let's like start to move forward in this. I'm seeing it a lot, like you're talking about, even at dinners or in social situations where I'm like, hey, let's just agree. When I go on a date, I'll be like, can I put my phone in your purse? And that's sort of a signal that you should also put your phone in your purse, and we'll just like be here present together. And it's interesting how magical that is. Last thing I'll say about that is we did an event here this weekend called Speakeasy, which is a salon and social where we don't allow people to have their phones. We like actively take them away and put them in a box. And at first people are always a little bit jittery about it, but then it was amazing how connected people were over just a game of Trivial Pursuit, some records being played, me making them cocktails, like that joy you sense out of people in terms of connection and presence, I think is irreplaceable and is also something people are really, I don't want to say desperate, but really interested in bringing back into their lives.
So the Art of Focused Work, Paul's new book, is there anything messaging wise on the book that we haven't really covered? I mean, I feel like we've given it a pretty good macro view, at least of what I've read, but yeah, I really enjoyed it, Paul. I'm not just telling you that because you're here and you're my buddy. It was an important read for me as a guy who I'm just constantly inundated with just. I'm not special. Everybody out there listening in 2025 probably feel this way. We're just getting hit by shit non-stop.
Yeah,
I thought and that's really good.
And thank you. That's what I am aiming for, is to give people just a little dose. You're not going to read my book and be fixed. It involves reading a whole bunch of people's books and listening to a whole bunch of people and trying this stuff out. But I do think that coming back to a sense of childlike curiosity in how we do the work that we're trying to accomplish, and understanding that this is very new and that it's okay that it's hard, and that sports has something to teach us, not just around systems, but also in terms of connecting to why you're doing it, right? Like, why did I play basketball? I loved the feeling of getting better. I loved the feeling of just like having this capacity that most people didn't have. And then I could check in with that every once in a while, build systems so that I connected to that. Also treating yourself a little better in terms of understanding that you, Chris, are kind of out on a limb, right? Where your success or failure depends on your ability to get up and do this day after day, right? It's not like you work at the Washington Post and you have a 20-year contract, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's also very similar to my basketball career, that in a lot of ways we've removed some of the vocational certainty that maybe our parents had. And that means we also have to take better care of ourselves. There's a piece in the book about personal infrastructure, just treating yourself better in terms of sleeping and eating and all of that. And that's not, you can't separate that from the stuff we're talking about, because it's not like my dad, the one that had the PhD, never actually did that job. He went to work for the Kansas Department of Corrections for 30 years. He was a research analyst. As long as he didn't shoot somebody or grope somebody, he was going to keep a job, right? It just wasn't like it. And that was true for a lot of people in the post-war era. Things have changed now, and we've put a lot of people into situations where their success depends on their ability to keep performing. I think we have to address that too, that a lot of times this work can be done quickly, but it has to be over the long haul done well, and you have to perform, or at some point you'll probably get fired, which is a lot like my basketball career.
Well, it's a fantastic book, The Art of Focused Work. And Paul and I, again, we're going to do an event together in Ames. I'll make sure I give the correct date, the 18th of July. That is a Thursday night at Sweet Caroline's, which is downtown. We're going to shoot for a 7:30 like program start, but I'll be there early and later. And Paul will have books there where you can buy them. I would encourage people. I hope my staff isn't paying attention, but to maybe do this for like gifts for your staff, maybe your partners or whatever, because it's an important message. That's the cool thing. I think literally anybody can read this book, and you could be a stay-at-home parent, and this book could, like, the process and all that stuff, just it really rings home. So Paul,
thank you.
Thank you. I look forward to getting to know you a little bit better here coming up next month when you're back in Iowa.
Yeah, I'm jazzed. I was just back in Iowa earlier in June, and it's interesting how much I'm enjoying being back there. So we'll have a great time. We'll probably drink a little too much. And
we will.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I'll hold you to that.
All right, deal, brother.
All right.
Paul Shirley, this week's guest here on CW Pod. That was great. Thanks to Paul Shirley for coming on the podcast this week. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope you could take something from it. I think anybody, no matter what you do in life, you could take something from that. Paul's brilliant, and really appreciate that. Looking forward to him coming to town. The 18th of July, you can join us at Sweet Caroline's. That is up in Ames on Main Street. We'll have more information about that as we throw that big party and talk about his book, talk about his basketball career. It'll be a fun night. My name is Chris Williams. Aiden Wyatt produced today's show. As always, we are presented by our friends at Steeple Ridge Bourbon in the Channel Seed Studios. Have a great rest of your week.